Support for this News from Lake Wobegon podcast comes from the Sleep Number bed by Select Comfort, the bed that lets you adjust the mattress firmness to your preference, your sleep number.
It's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, Minnesota, my hometown, out on the edge of the prairie. It's been a warm week this last week, a little wind and some rain as well, good rain on Wednesday. Most people got their gardens in over Memorial Day weekend, just in time for the rain. Good storm on Wednesday, a little lightning. The lightning bolt hit the tree just above the Lutheran church, and it pretty much wiped out the computer in the church office, so that now nobody knows who pledged what for this coming year. So just operating on faith, I guess, from now on. A lot of people still gardening in Lake Wobegon, just a good way to get over the blues, to go out and do something with dirt and make an effect right away. And also, you can use crap to make beautiful things. So it just sort of seems to pay off somehow. Make beautiful flowers and then put them up in pots and hang them on your porch. After that rain, the frogs felt their great primeval urge to go across the highway, as they always do. Maybe heard a siren on the other side, but it's the noon siren. It rings every day. But there was this tremendous slaughter. We do not break for frogs in Lake Wobegon, and it's kind of gory, especially to small children who are walking closer to the ground, after all, and who do see what goes on down there. They were very, very quiet. Myrtle and Florin Krebsbach had their first great-grandchild, Olivia, who was brought to town by her mother, May, on Memorial Day. They came to the cemetery to remember the dead, and then they sat around and held the baby all afternoon, just didn't even say anything. The adoration of a small child passing her around. The Lake Wobegon Whippets began their new season on Memorial Day weekend. They played the Avon Bards, and it was a good, close, tight game right up to the top of the third inning or so, when Ernie's knuckleball kind of lost its flutter, and boy, they were pounding him hard. Guys were hitting a long ball for the Bards, who had no business hitting long balls. Guys with wrists like sticks. Second baseman, shortstop, hitting home runs, and so they scored a few runs. And then they brought in Jumpin' Joe O'Connell, little guy, fastball, lefty, and he threw some heat there for an inning. Guy with black horn-rimmed glasses, patched with a piece of masking tape, until the glasses broke, and then he got kind of wild, and he walked a few, but he terrified the Bard batters there, so they're kind of tentative about batting after that, and when Ronnie then came in, he was able to kind of handcuff him for the rest of the game. And if it hadn't been for the 15 runs they scored in the third inning, it would have been a game, but that's what happened. Been wet there in Lake Wobegon. They're grateful for it. On the other hand, it does kind of play hob with the sewer system, so that these strange smells come up from the sewers, especially in the town hall, where the town clerk Viola Torr is sort of plagued by the sewer gas smell in her office. And she's worried that people may think it is her who come in. So the moment somebody comes in, she jumps up and says, "That's sewer gas. I want you to know that's sewer gas, and we're doing all that we can about it." But the look on her face kind of makes people think that it's probably her, and she just says that kind of a look that people have right after they've cut one, that kind of vacant look, Especially women who they go a whole year without cutting loose, and then they let one go, and they go blank for a while. The fishing season continues in Lake Wobegon and does very well. Florin Krebsbach, there were reports that he caught an 18-pound walleye, which is big for Lake Wobegon, but he threw it back because it bit him when when he took the hook out of his mouth. And he knows enough about fish bites that he went straight home and he had rhubarb. He had a pint of rhubarb sauce, and then just for good luck, he ate a couple stalks raw of rhubarb, and he drank a little rhubarb wine, and that sort of cured him. Rhubarb is a medicinal vegetable or fruit, as the case may be, and it's fruit. And I meant to say fruit, and it was known to the Chinese who used it in times of plague. It's a purgative. It's a cure-all, cathartic, and it's very important to combat fish bites. Fish carry a virus which has an effect on people. It causes a fish fever, and people really get around the bend who are bitten by fish who carry this fish virus. The first sign is talkativeness. A man who may have been very taciturn and calm and cool and collected all his life, and suddenly he starts talking a blue streak about all sorts of... That's a pretty good sign of fish fever, and it can come on fast and causes restlessness, and people just go off and do things that they wouldn't do under any ordinary circumstances, and rhubarb is the antidote for this. Roger Headland was bitten by a fish. It's very easy when you're removing the hook, especially if you're planning to throw them back, and the fish takes a little bite out of you and infects you, and if you don't do anything about it. And Roger Headland went to church the next morning and he filled out the communion card, which you don't do if you're a member. He filled it out in great detail, and then he had a couple of blank pages and he wrote a whole lot about what he thought about the church. And then during the announcements, he went up forward and he told people what he thought of them and had been meaning to tell them for years. And finally, Cindy realized what was going on, and she went down into the kitchen and she got some rhubarb pie and came up and kind of steadied him a little bit, kind of quieted him down a little bit. Karl Krebsbach had this. He was out fishing. Florian's son. He was out fishing. Monday he was out fishing, and he had caught a couple of fish, and then he was going to get up and get out of the boat when they pulled into the dock, and he sat back down on the bench, and he sat down on a lure which he'd caught a walleye with, and it went right into his left haunch, right into his left cheek, and he kind of wiggled it around, but it wouldn't come out. The hook was set there in his rear end. Well, he didn't want to tell anybody, but people did finally notice when he had this lure hanging down from his butt, and his fishing buddies were looking at it and studying it and so forth and talking about it, and finally they decided to call the rescue squad. And he said, "No sirens, please." But of course they used the siren, because that's one of the pleasures of being on the rescue squad, is being able to use the siren. So they all came down, and they had a knife, and they cut his pants a slit down there. So they opened him up, and there he was, wide open to view, and they discussed it, and they got out some tools, and they were thinking about what to do, and then Dr. DeHaven came down, the town doctor. He was on his way to his boat, which he's named the Trauma Center. He was walking down. He had a rod under his arm and a bottle of beer in one hand and a Pell-Mell cigarette in the other, and he looked over at the boat and saw Roger with his pants down around his knees, and he walked over and, took a look at it. No problem for him. He got a pair of needle-nose pliers, and he just kind of twisted it a little bit, and out it came, just like that. He said, "Toss him back," he said. "He's a bottom feeder." And Carl was a little bit embarrassed, and so he forgot to take rhubarb. He went back home, and his wife asked him what happened to his pants. He was kind of holding them together. He said, "They ripped." She said, "It looks more like they've been cut." He said, "It's a long story." And then the fish fever seized him, and he got in his pickup, and he just drove and drove and drove and drove. He just drove, and he wound up in Minneapolis. He wound up at an internet cafe. Who knows why he would ever go there, but he was under the influence of this fish virus, you see, and he walked into an internet cafe and he ordered a giant cappuccino, and that got him just further tanked up. And within 15 minutes, he was chatting with two different people on two different computers, and he was texting with somebody else, and he was talking to his daughter on another phone, and he was carrying on these conversations with people in Florida and Oregon and Michigan, and he had agreed to go build a house for somebody down in Galveston, and he was going to marry this woman from Illinois, and he was telling his daughter she ought to be a novelist, and then finally somebody brought him some rhubarb juice, and that brought him back. It's a dangerous thing, and rhubarb is the only known antidote to this fish fever. You see, Bob in the volunteer fire department in Lake Wobegon, he got it when he caught a walleye, and he yanked on the pole to land him in the boat, and he yanked a little too hard, and the walleye landed right in his lap and bit him right there. And suddenly he decided that he wanted to get Dottie back in his life, Bob, though they had split up long before. And being in the fire department, he knew something about fires, and he decided that he would go set her house on fire, and then he would rescue her from the burning house, and this would make her grateful, so that she would then marry him. So he went off and carried out this perfectly reasonable scheme, and started this tremendous fire and got her out of the house safely. And he said, marry me, I'm crazy about you. You know that I'm crazy about you. And she said, I wouldn't marry you if you paid me all the money in the world. He said, how can you say that after what I've done for you, saved your life? It was a tremendous fire. It was burning and burning and burning. And she said, I never cared for you, ever cared. You told me you liked me once, years ago. She said, that's before I knew I had other options. What other options, he said, as the fire department truck pulled in and the pumper and they got out the ladder and so forth. What other options? Well, she told him all about this guy in Seattle that she was in love with, and he'd never heard about. Well, he said, how can you just pick up and go to Seattle and leave me? Well, insurance. The house was fully insured. She got a bundle from that house burning down. She took off 2 weeks later. Fish fever, rhubarb. It's the antidote. Remember that. Useful information. That's the news from Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average.